Hi everyone, welcome to Mark's 900. I'm Mark. Now today we're going to go through 5 top safety tips. Well, if I was an instructor or an advanced motorcyclist, I could probably sit here and regale you with all sorts of anecdotal evidence about why you should take a certain position on the road, what to do at roundabouts, or how to take a corner really well. Well, it's not that kind of channel and I'm not that kind of guy. So today we're going to go through 5 tips that are kind of quirky, and I've picked them up along in the last 2 years. They may help you and perhaps stop you from dropping your bike in a car park full of other bikers. It's that sort of thing. So let's crack on then with the first one. And this is one thing that I learnt at Motorcycle Live. Now, we were watching a guy on a great big Harley Davidson go around a very tight course, and he was teaching us about manoeuvring the bike at low speed. And one of the things that he showed us, I kind of went out loud, wow, that's a good idea. And immediately about 20 or 30 people all stood around me and went, yeah, it was. And I thought, well, why doesn't everybody know this? So this is going to be my first top tip for you. Okay, I'm going to level with you all now and say that it's been very many years since I did my motorcycle training, but I do know that when I'm wheeling the bike around, I should have my hands on the handlebars and my fingers on the front brake ready to stop the bike from getting away from me. The problem with this is that if the handlebars are at a slight angle and I hit a patch of ice or something slippy, then there's a good chance I could fold the bike in half and drop it on the floor. The sort of thing I mean is this: handlebars are at an angle and I'm wheeling the bike and I need to stop. Ooh. And what happens is the bike starts to fall. And once these start to fall, there's no stopping them. Now in this case, I had the side stand down to help me. But if it was to fall the other way, that could be a problem. And the other thing is, if I'm going down a slope and the bike's getting away from me, this can be a real problem. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. My garage is an absolute mess. And every morning I have to negotiate my way out of here and down this tiny little ramp. Now at any point, if I was to hit one of these slip hazards, I could let go of the bike and it could get away from me because I'm just controlling it on that front brake. Now luckily, there is a solution to this problem. So here comes this marvellous tip that I learnt. Instead of using your front brake to control the speed of the bike and to stop it, pull the clutch in, bang the bike into gear, and then when you push it along and you want to stop, just gently release the clutch and it applies braking pressure to the back wheel. So you're going along and you want to stop, let go of the clutch. That does mean that if the front wheel's at an angle, or if the bike's starting to get away from you because you've let go of the handlebars, what's going to happen is the bike will just stop and brake at the back wheels and you've got a fighting chance of regaining control. It has saved me countless times when I'm coming out of that mess which is my garage. What a top tip. The next thing I want to talk about is boots, because when I started riding my bike I was wearing these. They've got nice thick leather uppers and they've got a thick rubber sole, which kind of gives them enough protection just about for my feet, but they're not ideal and really you should be wearing a proper motorcycle boot. But they were okay whilst I was on my 125, and the real issue was not so much around the protection of the boot itself, but these, the laces. Now the laces on these are very long, and as you can see, my trusty dog has actually managed to chew them. So, what's the problem with the laces then? Let me show you. Now I got this next problem from a Facebook page where somebody reported it and several other people had said the same thing had happened to them. I'm not just talking about one or two, there were like loads of people that have experienced this problem. So let me explain it. If you've got big dangly laces like I have, they can get caught around that gear shifter or they can get caught around the foot peg. What happens is you come to a stop with your right foot on the brake and you go to put your left foot down, as you should do, and your foot is attached to the gear lever. So you can't put your foot down properly, and once again the bike folds up on top of you. Now it might sound rare, and I guess it would be quite rare for your lace to do that, but it only needs to happen once, and you're not going to notice it's happened, and when you come to a stop, that is going to be a disaster. So I was telling my mate Dave about this, and he said, do you know what, Mark, back in the 1970s when I was riding an AP50, I used to have exactly the same problem, except that my flared trousers would get caught around the gear shifter, the foot pegs, and not only that, they get sucked into the chain as well. So if you're a fan of Lionel Blair's, just be careful with those too, because they can get snagged on all sorts of things. Luckily, my mate Dave doesn't wear flared trousers anymore, well, not at least for the last couple of weeks, but he still does ride an AP50. In fact, he's much older and wiser now, and he's tuned this thing in all kinds of ways. In fact, he's even written his own app on how to tune it. So later on in the year, we're going to see a whole load more of that. But anyway, let's move on to the next top tip.
And this tip is about tyres. But you know what a tyre looks like, so let's go for a ride. Okay, we're on a piece of road just outside of Cheltenham called the Seven Bends. It's a great windy road with good tarmac, although slightly difficult as you can't see around the bends, so you can never be sure that you're not going to run into a tractor or oncoming car. And yes, I can't believe it either. This is the third video where I'm actually talking about tyres and trying really hard to make them sound interesting. Well, simple fact is, they are interesting, and my next tip is about using the dodgy rubber hoops that come with your new bike. So unless you've got a high-end bike, the chances are it was made on a bit of a budget, and the manufacturer will have done everything they can to keep the cost down, and that includes doing deals with the tyre manufacturer to get the best deal on rubber. Fortnite does a brilliant video on this, and he explains how it all works so that bikes may seem to have good quality tyres because of what's written on the wall of the tyre, but in reality they're not quite the same as what you'd be buying off the shelf, and on the whole will be terrible. You see, my experience with the Z900 is that it's a budget bike, and the Road Sport 2s that it came with were dreadful, although I didn't realise it at the time. Looking back, I lose count of the times it took a small slip sideways or sometimes a larger slip, and on one occasion even spinning out when I was accelerating in the wet. Since I've had these Metzers on though, I haven't had a single brown trouser moment, not one tiny slip sideways, and I could argue that's because I'm a much better rider these days, but that's unlikely, and even if I was, I'd probably be going even faster around corners, and then I'd even have more chance of slipping. So the moral of this is, just spend 250 quid on a decent set of tyres and get rid of those factory specials at the earliest opportunity. You spent thousands of pounds on a new bike, so it's a drop in the ocean by comparison and may well save you bacon. I'm really not sure I'd want to ride along this road with my old tyres now that I know what a decent set feels like. The next thing I want to talk about is really a collection of things, which are the hidden dangers of fuel stations. And I don't just mean the horror story around the price of fuel at the moment. It's £1.75 a litre here in Gloucester. But that aside, the first thing is really the slippy floor. It's usually smooth concrete in a fuel station, and on top of that is a layer of diesel, which, as you probably know, is a type of oil. And I know that because I used to have an old Mitsubishi Pajero that I ran on cooking oil, and it worked just fine right up until the point it was stolen. Anyway, you have this smooth floor, and then you've got the oil, and then in Britain there's usually some rain as well. And the end result of that is something like an ice rink for you, your rubber tyres and your rubber boots. If you go too hard on that front brake, then there's a chance that you could fold the bike onto the floor. And the other problem is putting your foot down, only to find out that your foot's drifted off to the side, and unless you happen to be Jean-Claude Van Damme or an Olympic gymnast, there's knack all you can do about it. Of all the rides me and my mates have been on, the only time a bike has been dropped was for this exact reason in a fuel station. So please be very, very careful and just assume that when you pull up at a fuel station, the floor is like an ice rink. My next word of warning is about filling the tank. You're only supposed to fill up to the bottom of the filler neck, which is the bit I was just pointing out. It's that little metal platform that you can see inside the tank. On one outing, I decided to fill it all the way to the top of the tank though. The reason being that we were going on a long ride and I didn't want to be the first person to put my hand up and ask for fuel. Right, after I'd filled up, I went to my mate's house, parked up, and then we had a cup of tea, and when we came to leave, there was this huge pool of petrol on his pressed concrete driveway, and I was not a popular person. So don't ever think it's going to be okay to overfill, because you will leak fuel, and well, you can imagine exactly what the dangers of doing that are. The last thing I want to mention about fuel stations then is where there's a roundabout outside of one. You see, when diesel drivers fill up, I don't know what they do, whether they put too much in or what, but if there's a roundabout near a petrol station, they will be sloshing fuel all over the road as they lumber their way around the roundabout. I know this from a ride out with my old mate Adam, aka Sweet Triple, when the two of us nearly came a cropper on a roundabout right outside a fuel station in Cirencester. That really was a category 1 on the brown trouser scale, and to this day I have absolutely no idea how I stayed on the bike. So please, just watch out for roundabouts that are near fuel stations because they are as slippy as anything.
The last thing I want to talk about is this stuff, ACF 50. Now, I've got no idea what it's made of, but it's one of the greatest inventions to motorcycle mankind. I'm guessing it's something like squid ink and snake oil, but it was created by the US military and it's rated for use on plastics, metals and even electrical connections. What I do know is it's fantastic to spray all over your bike and stop it from corroding and rusting. So what we tend to do, give the bike a good wash, which I'll have to do in a minute, give it a spray with that, and then grab yourself a nice clean paintbrush, work it into all those difficult areas, and it does a fantastic job of protecting the bike. There is of course a downside to all of this, and that is that there are some areas where you really do not want to get this. The obvious ones are on your tyres and on your brake discs, so make sure you wipe it off thoroughly. I've actually ridden off down the road with this stuff on my brake discs and it took a very long time to stop the first time I pulled the brakes. But the other hidden danger that you might not have realised is the good old rubber foot pegs. Now these rubber foot pegs, if you get ACF 50 on them, become very slippy. And they're not always immediately slippy. So what happened to me was I rode off, with ACF 50 all over there. And as I got down the road, the weather turned bad, it got slightly damp, I think there was a drop of rain, and suddenly what I had was the rubber sole of my boots, the rubber of that, and in between ACF 50 and water, which is not a pleasant sandwich. I went round a bend, my foot slid off the peg and was flailing about in the air. It caused the bike to straighten up and I was careering off into a hedge. Now I managed to save it right at the last minute, but I can assure you that on my brown trouser scale, that one was at number 2. So just be very careful where you spray this stuff. And another tip as well is that it is really good, if you've got this type of boot, it's very, very good at cleaning the boot. It makes them up, brings them up, they look like new when you've sprayed them with some of that, but do not get any on the sole of the boot. So there you go, ACF 50, it's an absolute miracle, but it could cause you some damage, so just be very careful where you spray it. Don't get it on your tyres, don't get it on your brake discs, don't get it on the bottom of your shoes, and don't get it on your foot pegs. Right, that's my 5 top tips. I'll give you one extra one just before I go, and that is, no matter what you ride, make sure you keep your chain oiled. Right, I'll see you soon. The next thing I want to talk about is ACF 50, this stuff. Oh, Christ. Stay. Buddy, I won't be a second. Right, now, stay there. Good boy, good boy. No. Come here. Sit, stay, good boy, sit, stay, good boy, buddy, back, sit. So next thing I want to talk about is, oh, that's rubbish.